Just when it seemed like Sean Diddy Combs' legal situation couldn't get any more complicated, a new move behind the scenes changed everything. From inside prison, Diddy's legal team has now made a bold request, an immediate release, arguing that keeping him locked up is not just unnecessary, but excessive. According to court filings, this isn't a routine appeal. It's an urgent push to get Diddy out right now, while his case is still unfolding. Supporters say it's long overdue, critics say it's a desperate last-minute play, and legal experts are split on whether the courts will even take it seriously. So why is this happening now? What exactly are Diddy's lawyers claiming? And more importantly, what happens if the judge actually agrees? Because this request could either change the entire direction of his case or make his situation even worse. This latest move began quietly through legal paperwork rather than headlines. According to court filings, Diddy's defense team has formally asked for an expedited appeal, a request designed to fast-track the court's review and potentially secure his release much sooner than expected. At the center of this filing is one phrase that immediately raised eyebrows: immediate release. In legal terms, that wording is significant. It signals that Diddy's lawyers aren't asking for a routine review months down the line. They're arguing that keeping him incarcerated right now is unjustified while the appeals process plays out. What makes this request stand out even more is its timing. Appeals like this are usually filed after lengthy preparation, but in this case, the defense is pushing urgency, framing the situation as one that requires swift judicial intervention. Reports suggest they believe the original sentence went beyond what the law allows under the circumstances, and that raises a key question. Why push so hard, so suddenly? Because according to the defense, this isn't just about appealing a conviction, it's about challenging whether Diddy should have been behind bars in the first place. And once that argument is on the table, everything else about this case starts to shift. To understand why this release request matters, it's important to look at what Diddy was actually convicted of, not the rumors and not the headlines that circulated online. According to court records, the charges centered on interstate transportation tied to prostitution-related activity. Prosecutors argued that Diddy played a role in organizing and facilitating encounters across state lines, a claim they said crossed a clear legal boundary. The court ultimately sided with that argument, handing down a sentence of more than 4 years in federal prison. For the prosecution, the conviction represented accountability. For the defense, it marked what they believe was a severe overreach. This is where public perception often drifts from reality. Many assumed the case involved broader or more extreme allegations, but legally, the conviction rested on a narrower set of claims, ones that Diddy's lawyers now say were misapplied and overstated. And that distinction is crucial, because if the conviction itself is being challenged on technical and legal grounds, then the punishment attached to it becomes part of the debate. The defense isn't just questioning the outcome, they're questioning whether the sentence ever fit the crime, and that's exactly the foundation they're now building their appeal on. At the heart of this appeal is the defense's core argument that the sentence itself was excessive given the circumstances of the case. Diddy's legal team claims the court failed to properly weigh key factors that, in their view, fundamentally change how the conviction should be interpreted. According to the filing, the defense argues that the individuals involved were consenting adults and that no coercion was proven in court. They say this distinction matters because it challenges the way prosecutors framed Diddy's role, portraying actions that the defense insists were lawful but aggressively recharacterized. Another point raised centers on proportionality. The appeal suggests that similar cases have resulted in far lighter outcomes and that Diddy's sentence stands out as unusually harsh by comparison. Legal analysts note that this type of argument isn't uncommon, but it rarely succeeds unless the court agrees the original ruling crossed a clear legal line. The defense also points to procedural issues, claiming that certain assumptions were treated as facts during sentencing. While prosecutors dispute this, the argument has fueled debate over whether the punishment fits the conviction as written, not as perceived. And if even part of that argument holds up under review, it opens the door to something far bigger than a sentence reduction. Because if the court accepts that the sentence was excessive, the question isn't just how long Diddy should serve, it's whether he should still be serving time at all. This appeal hasn't just reignited legal debate, it's also sparked intense controversy outside the courtroom. Almost immediately after news of the filing surfaced, reactions began pouring in from legal commentators, media outlets, and the public. Some legal experts have questioned whether the defense's arguments truly meet the high bar required for an expedited release. They point out that courts are typically reluctant to intervene, once a sentence has already begun, especially in federal cases. From that perspective, the request is seen by critics as a long shot rather than a realistic path to freedom. Others, however, argue that the case highlights inconsistencies in how similar convictions are handled. They suggest that the severity of Diddy's sentence, combined with his public profile, has made this appeal a lightning rod for broader conversations about fairness and proportionality in the justice system. Online, the reaction has been even more divided. Supporters frame the appeal as a necessary correction to what they believe was an unjust outcome. Detractors see it as an attempt to leverage influence and resources to escape consequences that others would be forced to serve in full. That split reaction is exactly why this appeal matters beyond Diddy himself, because the court's response won't just determine his fate, it will signal how willing the system is to revisit a sentence once the door to prison has already closed. Another detail that has drawn attention is when this appeal was filed. The timing, late in the year, as the holiday season approaches, has raised questions about whether this move was purely legal or also strategic. Reports suggest that Diddy's legal team highlighted concerns about his current detention, including the conditions of confinement and the impact of continued incarceration while the appeal is pending. While these arguments are not uncommon, they take on added weight when paired with a request for immediate release rather than a standard review. Some observers believe the timing is intentional. Appeals framed as urgent near year's end can sometimes gain faster consideration, especially when claims of disproportionate punishment or unnecessary detention are involved. Others argue that the defense is attempting to humanize Diddy's situation, knowing public sentiment can influence how closely a case is scrutinized. It's important to note that claims about conditions or hardship have not been independently verified in court filings made public so far. Still, the narrative surrounding this appeal has shifted from legal technicalities to broader questions about whether continued incarceration serves a purpose while the case is under review. And that shift matters because once timing and conditions enter the conversation, the appeal is no longer just about legal precedent. It becomes a test of how urgency, optics, and law intersect behind closed doors. If the court were to grant this request, Diddy wouldn't simply walk free with no restrictions. Legal experts say an approved release would almost certainly come with strict conditions designed to keep him under close supervision while the appeal continues. In similar cases, defendants have been placed on home confinement, required to wear electronic monitoring devices, and subjected to severe travel limitations. Any contact related to the original case could be tightly controlled, and violations of release terms could result in an immediate return to custody. More importantly, a temporary release would not mean the case is over. The appeal process would still move forward, and the court would retain the authority to reinstate incarceration if the defense's arguments fail. In other words, release would be conditional, not a declaration of innocence. There's also the public dimension to consider. A high-profile release could intensify scrutiny around the case, drawing renewed attention from both supporters and critics. That spotlight could influence how each step of the appeals process is perceived, even if it doesn't directly affect the legal outcome. So while an approved release would dramatically change Diddy's day-to-day reality, it would not end his legal battle. It would simply move the fight from behind prison walls to a far more visible and closely watched stage. If the court rejects this request, the path forward becomes far more limited. A denial would mean Diddy remains incarcerated while the appeals process continues, a process that can take months or even longer to fully resolve. In that scenario, his legal team would still be able to pursue a standard appeal, but without the leverage that comes with arguing for immediate release. Legal analysts note that once a court declines expedited relief, future requests often face even steeper resistance unless new evidence or procedural errors emerge. A rejection could also reshape the defense's broader strategy. Without the possibility of release during the appeal, the focus would likely shift towards sentence reduction arguments or technical challenges aimed at narrowing the scope of the conviction. Those approaches are slower and far less certain. There's also the symbolic impact. A denial would signal that the court sees no urgent flaw in the original ruling, at least not one serious enough to justify intervention at this stage. For critics, that would reinforce the legitimacy of the sentence. For supporters, it would confirm that the system is unwilling to reconsider its position. Either way, a no from the court would mark a turning point. because once expedited release is off the table, the clock, not the headlines, becomes the dominant force shaping what comes next. What happens next now rests with the court. Diddy's request for immediate release has put his case back under intense scrutiny, forcing judges to weigh urgency, legality, and precedent all at once. If the appeal succeeds, it could reshape the trajectory of his sentence and reignite debates about proportionality in high-profile cases. If it fails, it reinforces how difficult it is to reverse course once incarceration has begun, no matter who's involved. Either way, this filing marks a critical moment, not because it guarantees an outcome, but because it reveals how much is still unresolved beneath the surface of this case. And until the court responds, one thing remains clear: this story isn't finished, it's entering its next chapter.